All right, we seem to be coming to a stopping point for now. So good evening. My name is Amy Thompson. I am the College and Career Counselor at Hillsborough High School. Welcome to our early college planning night for our 9th and 10th grade students and parents and guardians and everybody else who lives in the house who's getting to see this tonight. So with me tonight, I have one of our school counselors, Brian Yarashevsky. He's going to be doing a portion of our program regarding academic planning. So you will hear from him in just a couple of minutes. As we are presenting, I'll be screen sharing, so you'll see our presentation. You can access that on the HHS College and Career Counseling website. There's a whole presentations page there. There's a link for our presentation and all the links. We'll also be sending this out after the program, probably early next week, as soon as we can get also loading up the recording of this program, because we are recording. We'll be loading that up to YouTube as well, and then we'll send it out after the event. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen and get us started. So you should be able to see my screen right now. If anybody is not seeing my screen, I hope that you will all chat into that Q&A box, which is at the bottom, which is where you can ask any questions that you have. This is our program for this evening, starting out with an overview. And then Mr. Yarashevsky, will do our academic preparation portion, and then I'll go through the other items. And we'll try to do our best to address many of your questions at the end of the program. So what you're going to see here is throughout our presentation, you'll notice I have some of these little Instagram boxes, and these are direct quotes from our seniors. I asked some of them, what do you wish you knew a few years ago? What advice do you wish someone had told you, or that you had perhaps paid attention to because maybe somebody really did tell you? And I've interspersed some of those throughout our presentation. So that's kind of straight from the horse's mouth, and I think that that's way more powerful than anything I could tell any of you. So for our students who are just coming into the high school, really the first priority for them is to settle into high school. And actually this year, that's really the focus for 10th graders as well, and as well as the juniors and seniors, to be honest. We need them to come into the building, get used to that full day again, get used to being in person again, and really kind of stabilize. I think first marking period, there were a lot of ups and downs for students, and a lot of getting used to being back in a building and in a going to school full time and having to kind of interface with people all day, ask questions, look at each other's faces. We need them to get used to that. As part of that, they need to work on developing stronger study skills and time management. We find a lot of freshmen come into the high school, even in a normal non-COVID time, and they've kind of gone through the last 8 years and they really honestly haven't had to work all that hard. And freshman year can be a real kind of like smack in the face when they realize that it's not so easy anymore, and things that they used to just be able to kind of mail it in, that doesn't work anymore. And now that those first marking period grades have come out, hopefully we've started to kind of reassess, and they can work on learning what they need to do to get the results that they're looking for. We want them to look ahead, but we also want them to focus on the here and now. You see some of our seniors said, they didn't really understand that freshman grades were going to matter all that much. Newsflash, they matter just as much as the sophomore and junior year grades. When students are applying to college, they're applying using their freshman, sophomore, and junior years on their transcripts, and each of those years weights more or less equally into the GPA. So that freshman year GPA is the foundation. So we need them to do as well as possible in the courses that they are in now. Not only does that set them up with a really solid GPA, but it also keeps lots of doors open down the road for what courses they can take in the future if they're hoping to take more advanced courses. We'd like them to explore their extracurricular interests, chart out a plan, start thinking about college and what they want to do after high school. And we want, like your family, to start talking about college finances and what's realistic. And I'll have a section towards the end of our presentation tonight on financial aid. For sophomores, it looks much the same, but some of the differences are in sophomore year, it's a good time to start really starting to identify some of the important characteristics of what your student might want to be doing after they graduate and what that place kind of looks like if we're moving on to college. And also, sophomore year is not too early to start visiting colleges. I encourage you to start thinking about using kind of the spring semester as a good time frame to start visiting colleges that allow you to spread some things out and also really kind of clarify what your child is looking for. That also allows you to kind of work with COVID restrictions that are at different schools and make sure that you get some of those visits in. Also in the sophomore year, our students will be doing a youth science career interest survey with their counselors. That'll be typically as we move into closer to the spring semester. And so we'll send some information out to students about how we're going to be doing that once we move beyond kind of Christmas break time frame. So with no further delay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mr. Yarashevsky. I'll let him unmute himself and get started talking about academic preparation.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. So before I get into the academics, how they relate to college specifically, I want to lay some groundwork and just give two foundations. The first foundation is up on the screen already, and that's the graduation requirements that all students must complete in order to get their high school diploma and in order to get out of high school in the first place and go on to college. So it looks rather intimidating. In fact, I've shown this to my freshmen over the last 2 or 3 weeks in some group activities, and it looks intimidating. But what I want to do is I want to point out two things. First of all, the only 4-year graduation requirements are in English and health and PE. So those are the only courses that students will have to take all 4 years. Everything else is less than 4 years. The second thing I want to point out is this 1 year of world language. The New Jersey graduation requirement is only 1 year, but for kids going off to college, we really want to see them take 2, if not 3, or even 4 years. More years of a world language will look better to a college than just the minimum of 2. So you'll constantly hear us say, a lot of the counselors will be telling the kids, 2 years of world language, 2 years of world language. Technically, the graduation requirement is only 1. The last thing I want to point out from this screen is all of these graduation requirements will only take up about 20 and 1 semester of class periods. Our students at Hillsborough High School have 7 classes per year. So 7 classes each of the 4 years would give you 28 periods of classes. These graduation requirements only take up 20 periods and 1 semester of a class period. So there's going to be room where they get some choices, and that's what we hope to talk about most tonight with the academic preparation, is where the kids have their choices. Let me give you the second foundation. The second foundation is looking at a typical schedule for a Hillsborough High School student. We have 7 periods in a day. And because of the graduation requirements, the first 3 years technically look like this. English and health and PE are automatically put into the schedule because of the 4-year requirement. And then for the first 3 years, math, science, and history are going to be put in as well. We do have a little bit of flexibility with these 3 classes. We can move them around, but for the most part, most of the counselors try to get these 3 courses or these 3 subjects completed within the first 3 years of high school. Again, that will make senior year more open for choices. Now, when you get to your 3rd year, let's say your junior year of trying to decide whether you want to take a world language, you're going to have a choice because you'll have that 2-year minimum completed for a college. But the student will have to decide whether they want to continue with that. If it is an interest, if it is a strength, maybe it's not to their liking, maybe they would prefer to put something else in place of it. We're fine with only the 2 years of a world language and then replacing it, but we're probably going to suggest that you replace it with something academic, maybe an AP course, okay? In junior year, foregoing the world language and putting in something like AP microeconomics or macroeconomics, maybe putting in an AP psychology, something like that, strengthens a student's transcript without using a world language. So the kids aren't locked into that 3 or 4 years of a world language, but we would prefer if they would try to maybe put in something academic. The 7th class is always going to be electives, or is usually electives. Now, again, the counselors are going to probably try to encourage the students to get the graduation requirements out of the way. So we're looking at art courses. We're looking at some of the business courses, perhaps. If the students can, they should try to pick electives that would fit either their post-high school plans or anything that they might be interested in now. I know if they're only 9th or 10th graders at this point, they may not know what their post-high school plans are or what their major is. So now's a good opportunity to try some of the different electives and test them out and see what they may like and what they don't like. However, if they do seem as though they're leaning towards something in engineering, we have electives for that. If they're leaning towards something in the arts, we have plenty of classes for that. And the counselor can guide the students in that direction if that's what their electives, if that's what they would like their electives to be. But the important thing is that they get the graduation requirements done, as well as maybe explore some possibilities with that. So with those two foundations, what I'd like to show you is the senior year schedule. It should look something like this if they can get all of the graduation requirements done and if they can work their schedule the way that we just showed. The only thing that the counselor would have to put into that senior schedule is English 4 and health and PE. Everything else would kind of become a requirement. Now, obviously, or I'm sorry, would become an option. If there are any remaining requirements, obviously we're going to put those into the schedule. But mostly the senior schedule should be an option. Again, with college being the possibility and probably being the plan for most of us here tonight, a 4th year of math is strongly recommended by us. And then we still want to stay pretty much academic with our courses, okay? This is where the students need to talk to their counselors. They need to talk to Ms. Thompson about which colleges they may want to look at, which colleges they're interested in, because every college is going to require academic, but they're also going to require academics at a different level. Okay, if we start talking about your Princetons and your Harvards and your Yales, then these academic choices in your senior year probably should still be the highest level of AP courses that we can get. However, if we're not looking at very selective schools or highly selective schools, then we can still stay on that CP track, and we can take some of the academics that aren't as rigorous. Either way, those academic choices in our senior year probably should correlate with our plans when we're going to college. So what I often tell the students at this point in their senior year, prior to their senior year as they're planning their schedule, is that we want to pick classes that kind of correlate with our major. So if I'm going to be, if I want to do some sort of a major with mathematics, then maybe I want to do calculus and maybe I want to do a statistics course and I want to actually double up in math in my senior year. If I have students who want to do something in the medical field or in the health services area, then maybe we want to do 2 sciences like the anatomy and physiology class and the med lab class. Okay, so this is where the kids have some choice, but with college being the post-high school plan, we want them to make wise choices so that the colleges will look at their transcript and know that they're still taking a strong senior schedule and classes that are of their interest and of their possible majors. With those 2 foundations set in place, let me move on to how we select, or the course selection considerations that we have at the high school. So at the high school, we have 3 different levels of classes. We have our college prep, which is often referred to as CP. We have our honors level, and we have AP, which is advanced placement. The main difference between AP and honors is that they're both accelerated programs, but the AP program is actually allowing students to possibly earn college credits. What happens here is you take the AP course, you're offered an opportunity to take a test in May, and if you score well enough on that test in May, then the colleges will actually give you credit for having taken a course in high school. So honors and AP courses are just as rigorous, or they're the most rigorous that we have, but the AP offers the opportunity to get those college credits. Now, getting into the AP and honors level courses is all done through teacher recommendations. So if your student is in an honors class right now, then getting to honors or moving into honors next year is based off of that recommendation from the teacher. And there's probably a criteria that the teacher is going to use to move them into honors next year. If your student is in the CP level, then there's definitely going to be a criteria. It's going to be a little bit more rigorous than the honor student, but there still is that possibility of moving into the next level. All of these teacher recommendations can certainly be discussed with them, but basically they're going to use grades and how the student performs in the class on tests, on quizzes, and some other kind of soft skills about getting their homework done, participating in class, engaging in class to make those recommendations. Now, I mentioned the honors and the AP simply because on most college tours that you go on, you're going to hear a lot of the same thing. The colleges are going to tell you, we want to see honors and AP on students' transcripts. And a lot of schools do want that, but there are schools who still will take students who take CP classes or have been enrolled in CP classes. Here's the key. The key is that the colleges want to see A's and B's in the course levels that you're taking. So one of the most popular questions that you'll hear on the college campus when you're on a tour is, is it better to get a C in an AP course or an A in a CP course? And the colleges never really answer this question outright. They basically will say, we want to see A's and B's. So what the students have to do over the next couple of years is they have to kind of work and find out what level best suits them. And you may find that in math and science, I'm a CP student. Maybe in English and history, though, I'm an honors and AP student. It can differ. It doesn't have to be all or nothing for all the classes. It can be maybe an honors here or an honors there, but not in all of them. All right. The best thing to do is to be in the level that best suits you so that you can succeed and so that you can learn. As I brought up with the AP classes, there are actually 3 different ways that you can earn college credit while still in high school. The AP classes are the first way, and that again is by taking a test in May and hopefully scoring well on it. We also offer something at Hillsborough High School in concurrent enrollment classes with Raritan Valley Community College. Concurrent enrollment classes are basically classes where we have an agreement with Raritan Valley Community College that when the students take the class with us, they also earn 3 credits with Raritan Valley. This does cost a little bit of money, but nonetheless, it's still an opportunity to take a high school class and get that college credit. And then RVCC runs its early credits program, and that's basically a situation where the student takes a class at RVCC but can earn the credits with RVCC even though the student is still in high school. Okay, in the early credits program, the class is not offered at Hillsborough High School. It's a class where the student would have to go to RVCC or do the online class with RVCC. So that's the difference between early credits and concurrent. With concurrent, the students are actually taking the class at Hillsborough High School. One of the other things to consider when you're looking at your course selections is, if I am a good math student or if I really enjoy math, do I want to double up? The year that you would want to double up is when you're taking geometry and then possibly doing Algebra 2 as well. Again, the counselors use teacher recommendations for this, and we would strongly lean on the teacher to let us know if a student can take 2 math courses. What you have to remember is that 2 math courses in the same year is difficult. You've got a lot of homework in those cases. There's going to be a lot of pressure with the tests and the quizzes. So it's a big jump to take 2 math courses at the same time. There's also the possibility of taking 2 sciences in the same year. This is something that a lot of seniors will do, or they'll do if their major or their interest for going off to college is going to be something in the science field or something in the health field. But that's an opportunity as well. Probably one of the best things I can offer to you tonight about the academic preparation is that I think you should sit down and create a 4-year plan of some of the courses that you think you want to take. When you make this plan, remember, it's not set in stone. It's something that can be adjusted and can change year after year. But I think it's a good idea to sit down and do something like this because you'll be able to see where you can switch things up, maybe move things in and out that will better fit your plans. And as your plans change, then you can change the courses. Let me show you a quick example of a 4-year plan that I actually did with a student of mine who's very science oriented and was quite the academic young lady. She came in freshman year with a bunch of honors courses, and she actually decided to take biology and chemistry during the freshman year. So notice that there are no electives in her freshman year schedule. Okay, so by doing this plan, you right away can see physically what I have to do in terms of planning in the future for any kind of electives or graduation requirements. Okay, so now as we move through, you'll see that she's got sophomore year. She does get an elective in there, but now she takes 2 sciences. Okay, and then junior year, still intense. She's got the AP micro macro. One of the things that you have to remember about AP micro macro is that also counts as our financial literacy requirement. So that's how this particular student did that particular graduation requirement. And then you can see her senior year. Okay, now this is not an example that I give to you because I think everybody should follow it. It's not an example that is for everybody, but I throw this out there simply that for the idea that if you sit down and plan out your 4 years, you'll be able to see where you can get all the graduation requirements in, but also see where there are open spots and what you can do with them. I strongly suggest you share this with your counselor when you sit down and do it. We will be meeting with everybody and going through this year after year with each student as they plan their schedule for each year. So, you know, if you kind of have this with you and share it with your counselor each year, the 2 of you can work on it and make sure that you get the graduation requirements while also getting the classes that you think you want in preparation for college. Okay, with that, let me talk a little bit about the course selection process at Hillsborough High School so that you understand how all of this kind of culminates into getting the courses and communicating with your counselors. So, as I said before, the academic courses, the students are recommended by the teachers. So that's probably going to happen somewhere in February at some point. Those recommendations are posted in Genesis. So the parents and the students will be able to view those recommendations. However, one of the other things I would suggest is, let's say you're in a CP class right now and you want to get to the honors level, have that conversation with the teacher right now. Talk to the teacher now and say, listen, this is my goal. I'd like to get from this CP class to the honors class next year. What do I need to show you? What do I need to do? How can you help me get to that point? All right, this is my goal. I'd really like your help. And have that conversation now instead of kind of springing it on the teacher when the recommendations are already done. Okay. Once the recommendations are already done, you still can discuss it with the teachers. There'll be time to do that in February. We hope that students will meet with the counselors in February and part of March. That will be hopefully an individual meeting where you'll have that conversation about your plan, about your goals. This is where you'll choose your electives and you can kind of explain your academic plans to your counselor, and we would kind of keep that in mind with making any suggestions while we meet with you. If you don't get the recommendation that you're hoping for in February, please know that the teachers will review these recommendations again in June and make any updates. They would make updates because a student has improved enough that they can now be recommended for honors. They could also make the change in that the student didn't do as well in the second semester, and now they say, well, I don't think you're ready for honors. You need to go to CP. So just know that you have the second semester to improve and to keep that same honors recommendation if you already received that. Based on those recommendations, you're going to be constantly reviewing and adjusting that 4-year plan. And hopefully this is going to get you the academics that you need in order to be prepared for your college goals. Mr. Thompson?
All right, before I go over, I just want to hit on one question that came up. Someone asked about, can the second course for doubling up start now in the middle of the year? And I wanted to see if you could answer that and talk about maybe what an alternative plan might be for a student who realizes a little too late that, like, oh, maybe I should have done something different, or maybe I want to cram something else in. How can I do that? Can I take something online or over the summer? How does that work?
Right now, we can't change the schedule. So especially if it's a full year course. So if you're current, like I'm assuming this question came up with a student who might currently be in geometry and wants to double up into algebra 2 this year, we can't make that adjustment now. However, we can pursue maybe an online course, or we can pursue something in the summertime. In the past, Hillsborough High School has had a summer program for some of the math courses that students have been allowed to take, and algebra 2 and geometry have been part of that program in the summertime. So you might be able to take the opportunity to take the class over the summer, which would in effect give you the same idea of taking the two classes in the same year.
Okay, I think that's kind of caught us up to everybody else. So I think I'm good to go on.
Okay.
All righty, I'm going to turn myself back on. All right, so moving on into extracurricular activities. So when we talk about college and we talk about extracurricular activities, what schools are really talking about is anything that the student does outside of the classroom. So anything that happens after like 2:25 p.m., and sometimes there are even some exceptions as well. So that will include clubs inside and outside of school. It would include work, like a real paid job, like working at Five Guys, internships, co-ops, research, volunteering, scouts, 4-H, things at their church, things at their temple. For some students, that's also going to include things like caring for siblings and parents and relatives. That actually counts as an extracurricular because it tells us a lot about a student's level of responsibility and their ability to time manage. One of the things that's really important, though, is that as a student's getting involved in school, and we want them to do that, one, yeah, it's great for college applications, but two, it's also great for growing as a person, and finding that connectedness to Hillsborough High School. So I'd love to see a lot of them get involved in our school organizations as well as the things in our community. But they can't get so focused on those extracurriculars that they really let their grades slide too much. Because what they're looking for is that balance between academics and extracurriculars. So we want you to do both, and we'd like you to do both well, of course. So what are colleges looking for? They are looking for quality over quantity. And I feel like that's, somewhat of a change from kind of admissions past, because I'm also seeing that they're really looking for evidence of passion and commitment, evidence of that student's legitimate interest, a relationship to their career goals, the longevity of their participation. So, I think we probably all remember the words, well-rounded student, which meant that a student had, in old terms, like they were good academically, but then they were in a sport and they were also in a community service activity, and then they were in a couple of clubs and they worked a job. And so they did all of those things. What I'm seeing more and more as we start talking about college admissions is that schools are really looking for, where a student has chosen to spend their time. And it is okay if that is in 3 or 4 activities and not 9 activities. We also encourage students, if you try some things out and they're not a great fit for you and you don't enjoy them, you don't have to finish them. Yes, finish your current commitment to that activity, but you're not committed to that thing for 4 years. Find something else that you're going to like more. That's part of growing and changing and figuring out who they are. And that's part of what we want them to do in high school and eventually in college as well. Colleges are also really looking for evidence of a student really thinking outside themselves. So that could be service, volunteer work, but it doesn't have to be. There's not a checklist necessarily that says, a student needs to have, one thing of community service and they have to start a nonprofit. There's not check marks like that. So each student might have a different way that they're thinking outside themselves. So it may not be entirely in volunteer work, but it might be the role that they're thinking that they're in a team or group setting, or the particular activities that they're doing. Things like peer mentoring, or kind of buddies clubs, things like that. Those are a great way to talk about a student who is thinking outside themselves. Also, evidence of leadership in that organization. And it's important to know that leadership is not just defined as holding an elected office, which we know can often be somewhat of a popularity contest. So leadership is in your actions in a club or in an organization, or in things that you're doing on an everyday basis. So are you showing initiative? Are you creating programs that are long lasting. Even if you're not the president, you may still be, kind of running an activity within that organization. That's leadership. The most selective schools are, looking for evidence of a lasting impact. They're looking for high-level awards, state, national, international, as well as the unusual and extraordinary. Now let's talk a little bit about summer plans. So I do think it's really important for students to take some downtime and relax over the summer. However, that can't necessarily be the entire summer plan. So I like to see that as one of the elements of summer, but not the only one. So some students may choose to take some coursework. And so we've talked about a little bit how you can take a course online, you could take a course in person, depending upon what we offer. Students might engage in volunteer experiences, travel. Work is a fantastic thing to really be putting on a resume. It says a lot about responsibility, money management, interacting with other people in person, not, just over a text device. So it teaches some great skills that colleges are really liking to see. Some students may also choose to enroll in some type of summer program. Let's talk about those summer programs and what they might look like. You'll see in this presentation, there's a link. I've got a whole sampling of summer programs on my website. It is not exhaustive. I will also tell you it is not current up to the minute because we are a little bit too early to be talking about most summer programs at this point, especially in the kind of COVID-ish time that we still are in. So 6 months from now is maybe a little too far ahead for many programs to be making firm plans about whether they're going to be virtual or in person. So I think we'll see a lot of holding off on that a little bit until we get closer to that February, March timeframe. But by all means, take a look, start looking at what is out there, bookmark some things that are of interest to you, and then we'll come back to it. You may have noticed that I've been sending out opportunities newsletters about once a month or so. So as those things get more updated, I'll direct you to those through those newsletters that I send out. So let's talk about the kinds of summer programs there are and what's the value of a summer program. For the vast majority of summer programs out there, the value is not solely in having the item on the resume. So it's not just in saying that I attended the National Youth Leadership Forum in medicine. That in and of itself, not so valuable. And some of you might be getting some things right now. They're usually a folder. They've got like a gold seal on it or a letter with a gold seal, and they congratulate you on the exclusive invitation you're getting to attend these summer programs. And then they talk about how much it costs, and it's like $3,000 or $4,000 for a week or something like that. Are those things a scam? No, they're not a scam. They're a legitimate thing. We have had students go to that. That being said, is that going to get you into a college? Nope, not at all. It's basically an expensive enrichment opportunity. However, that being said, there can be value in that enrichment activity in the experience that a student is having during that program. What have they learned during that program? But also I find it's more in what interest did that program spark in them? Because maybe they were at some type of summer program, they had presentations by a certain person, they reached out to them after, perhaps that person referred them to some internship opportunity. Or perhaps as a result of going to a summer program, I realized I have some interest in forensics, and now I think I want to try to take some more advanced science courses that I didn't previously have an interest in. So then it kind of serves this purpose. It also serves this purpose, quite honestly, when students go to a summer program and they realize after a week that, you know what, the thing that I thought I wanted to do for a career is not actually what I want to do. I don't really enjoy it at all. So then it served its purpose, and that student has ruled that out earlier, and you're not spending college money on them figuring out that question. But that being said, that experience gained, it can be gained at a higher price tag, but it can also be gained at a lower price tag. So, don't feel that you have to be obligated to go into some of those, shiny gold seal type programs. In terms of which ones do have a lot of value, there are some very selective programs. Those are details on my website. Those tend to hold more value in terms of the actual item on the resume. However, they are very, very, very selective programs. There are lots of other things I encourage students to look at, though, things like going through EMT training over the summer. That application process just opened up recently. So that's a great option for students to do. And that's a long-standing impact. Remember we talked about activities and showing impact on the community, the desire to impact those around you. Well, that sounds like becoming an EMT, right? And it also gives them an activity for the next year. So that's a great thing to think about. Someone went to the Delaware Valley, I think, watershed program last year. And that was a much lower price tag. I see someone just asked the age requirement for EMT training. I'll answer it now because I know it. It is 16 by the start of the program in June. And it's in Somerville or Somerset. I'm not positive exactly where that is, but the information's online. So with no further ado, I'm going to move to everybody's favorite topic, standardized testing. And I know someone asked me a question about COVID and the impact on SATs. So hang tight, I'll get there, I promise. So first things first, when you talk about standardized testing, let's start with the PSAT, since that is the one that you will encounter first in high school. And our 10th graders already encountered the PSAT, or many of them did anyway. In terms of PSAT, there's actually 3 different types of tests, but at Hillsborough, we give only the PSAT NMSQT. That's the PSAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. So that is taken by both sophomores and juniors. For our sophomores who took it this year, assuming we're moving back into normal times and not COVID times anymore, I think and if you took it this year as a sophomore, a lot of times what our students will do is if they kind of gauge where their score is and decide, would I actually be competitive for a National Merit Scholarship next year? Now, the entire PSAT NMSQT is out of 1520, so 760 on evidence-based reading and writing and 760 on math. So it's out of 1520. In order to be competitive for the National Merit Scholarship, you need to be in the very high 1400s. So we do have many students who will decide, you know what, I tested sophomore year, I kind of got my baseline. Maybe I've started to do some SAT prep. There's not any real purpose for me testing again in junior year on the PSAT. I'm just going to move ahead to the SAT. That's fine. I encourage them to do that. But students who are likely to be high scorers, they definitely should plan to test again in the junior year so that they can meet the eligibility requirements for national merit, assuming those don't change. Also, students who did not take the option to test this year as sophomores, I very much encourage them to take the PSAT as a junior. Someone asked when the National Merit Scholarship qualifying tests occur. That is the same as the PSAT. So what the National Merit Test uses for their first guideline is, a student's PSAT score. So this year that was given on October 13th. Next year's date is October 12th, 2022, and we test on Saturdays in Hillsborough. So for students that tested this year, the results will be available next week. I know people have been starting to occasionally email me and ask me. Results will be available to students in New Jersey on December 7th. Students will get an email from College Board, and I will also load those up to SCORE as soon as I can on the 7th as well. So that'll be another place that students can check to see what their scores were. So actually, let me go back one second. One other thing I wanted to show is that PSAT NMSQT, I said it maximizes at 1520 with a 760 in each section. The regular SAT maximizes an 800 in each section, a total of 1600. But the way the tests and the questions are scaled, basically your student's score on the PSAT is about the same score they would have gotten on the SAT if they took it on the same day. So if your kid gets like an 1100 on the PSAT, when those scores come back, they would have gotten about an 1100 had they have taken the SAT in October as well. But of course, there's a higher ceiling on the SAT. As I just mentioned, the SAT is down to 2 sections. For those that have older kids, the essay is gone. It is no longer. We're back down to actually now it's evidence-based reading and writing. Apparently I missed that in my corrections, and math. Those are only 2 that are left. So each of those are at 800. There is another testing option that is increasingly popular. That is the ACT. The ACT, if you're older like me, it was primarily a Midwestern test, but is much more widespread now. The ACT is on a scale of 36. It has 4 required sections: English, reading, math, and science. Writing is optional there. I don't particularly encourage students to take that. My gut is that it will probably be eliminated off the test and before very long. I'll have to get you that correct date on the PSAT. They also give on a Wednesday, but we don't. I'll look it up and send that out. Or maybe Mr. Y can check on it for me. So for the ACT, it's those 4 sections. Each one of them is scored out of 36 points. And then they give you an average of those 4 sections, and that is the composite score, also out of 36. There is an equivalency, between the SAT and the ACT. And if you Google SAT, ACT concordance, or you look on my website, you'll find some links that you can see what the approximate equivalencies are. I encourage students to look at, both tests. Some students are better on one than the other. And so it's a good idea to check them both out and figure out which one is a better option for them. Colleges do not prefer one exam over the other, but you should be aware that some schools require reporting of all scores. So once you take that first SAT or ACT, you've started to build your testing resume. And for some schools, they'll require that you report every single time that you take it. And that's one reason I don't really encourage students to test very early in high school, because they are starting that testing resume that they may not be quite ready to start at that point. So now what's going on with test optional and test blind, and what is this stuff that you're hearing about in the news? Is it likely to trickle on down to our current sophomores and freshmen? Yes. So when we talk about testing, you're going to hear the phrase test optional. Basically, what that boils down to is send them if they help, but don't send them if they don't help. When I look at our students for both last year and this year as well, I would say probably around half of them are applying with scores and half of them aren't. But what they're doing really varies between the different schools that they're applying to. So for schools that their scores are lower than the typical range, they won't send the scores to those schools. They'll apply test optional. But then they've got other schools on their list where their scores are quite good and would be helpful for them. And so they'll go ahead and send their scores to those schools. Then we've got some schools out there that are test blind. Those schools do not consider the SAT or ACT at all in the application process. That includes the University of California system schools and the Cal States, Worcester Polytechnic, Dickinson. There's a handful of other schools as well. Those policies, the test blind ones, those schools, those are permanent policies that those schools have. When we talk about the test optional policies, there is a very long list of schools where those are also permanent policies. Some of those schools have been test optional for 10, 15, 20 years. Some of them more recent. Some of them became test optional during COVID and have converted that to a permanent policy officially. Others are still going a year at a time. Some schools are continuing to extend. I just got a notification this week from Columbia University that they're extending 2 more years. Honestly, I think that is going to be the movement that most schools are probably going to permanently become test optional. That being said, there are some out there, even this year, that require testing. And typically, at least as of now, that is really being driven by their state university systems and is being driven by their state board of governors. So it's being driven by politicians, not the schools themselves. And so that currently includes all of the universities that are public in Florida, as well as all of those that are public in Georgia. I would not look for those policies to be shifting anytime soon. There has been no movement, and Florida even required the tests last year during COVID when you couldn't even find a test up here. So for now, I will tell you that our recommendation for students is to plan to test. And that's the same thing I told them this year. Go ahead and take the test because the ball's really in your court. You can decide what you're going to do. And we'll see what changes by the time, the current sophomores and freshmen become to be, of college application age, and we get into kind of late in their junior year. We'll have a better idea of what the rules are going to be for their classes, their grade level, and what they're going to do. In terms of PSAT tests, those are not used for college admission at all. The PSAT is a practice test, and it also drives national merit, but it does not go to colleges at all. So when to test? We do recommend testing 1 to 3 times in the junior year. I don't recommend sophomore year testing and certainly not freshman testing unless they need it for some type of other program that they're doing, in which case they might need to sit for the test. We do see an increasing number of students who are testing in the August prior to their junior year. They spend typically a significant amount of time doing test prep over the summer prior to that junior year. I have had, in the past, it's been very common for students to do testing into the senior year, and we are still seeing that. I mean, there are still a few testing this weekend, but we did have quite a few seniors in October as well, and that's still okay for students to do that. But I am hearing from more and more students that they'd honestly prefer to just be over with the testing before they even get to senior year. One, so that it's something off their list, they can shift their focus elsewhere, but also so that they have a much better idea kind of where they stand in terms of schools and planning for their application process. Any of those options are okay. There are some important things to consider when students are planning out their timeline for what they want to do for testing. First and foremost, I always encourage you to think about what purpose is it to test at this time. So, have I done any prep? Am I just taking this so I can see how I can do? Because there are other free ways for you to see how you can do so that you don't have to pay the College Board $55 for you to come and test with me on Saturday to do that. So there's other ways to do that. I encourage you to think about where is the student in particular in the math curriculum. Students who are in sophomore year and you are currently enrolled in math analysis, you are the most likely to be ready to test in August prior to your junior year. Students who are enrolled in Algebra 2 this year, you'll also probably be ready to test if you want to do that. Students who are in geometry this year, you're probably not quite as ready to do that test early in the junior year because the SAT goes all the way through the Algebra 2 curriculum, and it has a couple of little questions on trigonometry as well. Those are also covered in Algebra 2, but they're a little bit more advanced math. So a student who's just taking Algebra 2 as a junior won't have had that content yet. So for those students, it's probably a little bit better to hold off until later in their junior year. Also need to think about when making that junior plan, is the student taking any AP tests? They heavily involved in sports and extracurriculars. Think about where they've got to spread things out so that things don't conflict for them. You can't be in a lot of places at once. We want to make the test as meaningful as possible. So doing it smack in the middle of AP testing is usually not a good option, nor is doing it in the middle of the musical for students who are super involved there. So you want to make that plan ahead of time so you don't get boxed into some dates that don't really work for you. And also, is the student ready to commit that score? Now, another thing that we talked about was AP exams. Mr. Y started to talk about it. Those are content-based exams. They align to the corresponding class. Students take them in May of the year that the class is taken, and they're optional. So they're not required tests if you're in the course. You could be in the course and not take the test. However, if you want to get college credit for the class, you do need to take the test and you do need to get a certain minimum score, which varies by college. Also, self-study is permitted for exams. That being said, I am seeing more and more students self-studying for AP exams. The universal word that I have heard from colleges is it is not generally a huge benefit in the admission process. So I see some students trying to take as many AP tests as possible, get as many, but their school schedule does not align with the rigor of the AP court exams that they are taking. And what I generally find is that it is not as beneficial to them in the college admission process as they think it will be. So students, colleges prefer to see you take the class and the exam where possible. Now, might there be some times that a student wants to self-study a test because they just can't fit a course in their schedule? Yeah, absolutely, that happens. And that's a great reason to self-study for a test. But self-studying because you're hoping to avoid a certain teacher or because you just think it'll be easier and you'll get the higher grade in the class and then go ahead and AP test in the subject, that's not going to pan out in the way that you hope it will at the end. Scores, are they looked at in the admission process? It depends. By the vast majority of schools, no, they're actually not looked at in the admission process. However, for more highly selective schools, yes, they may be looked at in the admission process. And in which case schools are really looking for, the highly selective schools are looking for scores of 4 or 5, which are, the exams are scored on a 1 through 5, with 5 being the best. College credit is given for sometimes 3s, but generally 4s and 5s. So more selective schools are looking for 4s and hopefully 5s on those AP exams that you are submitting. Students should consider their likely performance, the realistic study effort, likelihood of getting credit as they're deciding if they should take those tests each year. And we have concluded the AP registration process for this year. Moving on, let's start talking about getting started and visiting schools. So first thing I could say about getting started, stop looking at the colleges. Don't look at the name of the school first. You really want to start the process by looking at the student and the student doing some real reflection on what they want out of the college experience and what type of school they are looking for. I find that I'm seeing some lists coming out of students where the only thing that is common amongst the schools is that they perhaps might be ranked highly on a similar list. But they might be looking at big schools, small schools. The students are changing their major depending upon the school they apply to. If I apply here, I'm applying to pharmacy, but if I apply there, I'm applying to business, and over here, I'm applying as economics. I can tell you it does not, again, pan out the way you want, because the students' activities and everything that they have on the rest of their application shows no evidence that those different majors are a good fit for them. As part of the application process, there's a lot about essays, and a lot of these schools have a why this college essay. And so students really need to authentically be able to say why that place is a great fit. So if they do that work ahead of time on knowing what they're looking for, they're going to find that their schools are going to be a great fit, and they'll be much more able to authentically speak about that in their application essay supplement. I've got some worksheets on here that students can do. There's a really good podcast that students and parents that you can listen to about finding out some of the things that you might want to think about. When I talk about fit for schools, though, I'm really looking for the right fit. I'm not just looking for a quote unquote good school. I'm looking for a good fit school. So I look at these three elements of the pie. Here in my pretty little picture, they're equivalent, right? But that's really going to vary by student and by family. So for some families, the academic component is most important. They've got a super adaptable kid who is going to be happy at any school that they go to. Maybe the finances don't matter as much, and so academics takes up the biggest piece of the pie. For others, finances are going to drive the bus, and that's going to take up the biggest piece of the pie. When we talk about academic fit, these are the types of things we're talking about. The school should have the majors that the student is looking at, the appropriate level of academic rigor for the student, different kinds of programs that they're looking for, research opportunities. All of those things are part of an academic fit, as well as being an academic profile match to the school, to the student that we're talking about. Now I'm going to move on. When I move on a little bit further, I'll tell you now, you're going to see a list of some of our most popular schools where students apply, and I'm going to give you some average GPA and score ranges, which starts to get you thinking about what those different types of schools look like. And as students go through the college application process, they'll need to kind of figure out for which schools are they a match based upon their own grades and GPA and test scores once they have those. And so that's what we mean by academic profile match. In terms of social and environmental fit, some of the easiest things to knock off as first questions that I like to ask students: where do you want to be? How far from home? Do you like the snow? Do you want to be near the beach? Do you want mom and dad to be able to pop by for Tuesday night dinner? Or do you need to have at least a 2 or 3 hour warning when you see them move on Find My Friend? Are you okay with flying? Are you okay with the idea that you might only be able to come home at Thanksgiving and at winter break? How big of a school are you looking for? Are you looking for, when you close your eyes and you picture yourself on this college campus, are you walking across a big green? How many people are walking around you? Are you in a crowd of thousands at a tens of thousands at a football stadium? What about when you're sitting in your class? Are you looking around and you're at a seminar table, or are there 300 of you in the room and one professor at the front? What does this place look like? Do you see yourself getting involved in Greek life and fraternities and sororities? Is athletics important? Are you hoping to continue in athletics? What else is important to you? And part of the value of visiting schools is that you can get some of the personality of a school when you visit. And so that's one of the things that I will really encourage students to do. let's talk about finances. And I promise I'm going to have a whole section about finances. But when we talk about financial fit, we want to think about the cost of attendance. And I'll refer to that phrase later. But what cost of attendance is it is the tuition and fees charged by the school. It is room and board if a student is living on campus. It also includes things like books, supplies, transportation, and other personal and miscellaneous expenses. So students need to look at that full cost of attendance because the cost of school is a lot more than just tuition and room and board. There's a lot of incidental. For some families, the ability to commute is important. For many families, we're going to be talking about merit scholarship accessibility and the possibility of getting those, because that is really the easiest way to reduce the cost of the school that the student is going to. I want to think about loan amounts that the student might need at a school. And I'll also talk a lot about value. We have a lot of students who might be saying, students who have a particularly strong GPA, and they might be looking at schools and they've got a ton of reach schools on their list, those schools that are all those dream schools, the Ivies and other super selective places, and they've got Rutgers on there. And I say, like, what about the places in between? And for many of our families, they kind of feel like, you know what? I could be super happy at Rutgers. Perhaps it's not my first choice, but I could be really happy there. I'd feel like the value is there. I am not sure that the value is there for my family with some of the schools that lay in between. We perhaps don't want to pay $70,000 to go to a school that's somewhere in between. But that assessment is an individual family assessment on what is worth it for your family. It seems like it's really far off, but start thinking about those things as you start doing visits, as you start looking at schools, and as you start looking at price tags of schools. What can you afford? And not only what can you afford, what are you willing to pay for different schools? Because those things might be different. So what are some tools for when we get to the actual searching part? At Hillsborough High School, we now use a site called SCOIR, SCOIR. It's not Squire, it is SCOIR. For those that have had students at HHS in the past, this replaces Naviance, so it's a new system. For my sophomore friends, I actually just pushed out another invite to you before we got started today. So for our sophomore students, they can log on there. You'll see a college search tool there under the word Discover on the top of the page. We will be sending out SCOIR invites probably within a couple of weeks to our freshmen as well. There are some other options on here for some tools for the search to help students look. I will say a very popular option for our students is each year I compile a list of HHS students admits by GPA, not the kids' names, but I give you GPA bands so that you can try to get an idea about, based upon your GPA, what types of schools are we looking at? So it gives you lots of suggestions. These are the types of schools these students apply to. These are some places they got acceptances to. These are some places they got denied to. These are some places they got waitlisted at. I find that really helps families as they go through the process to kind of figure out where their students' place is. Now, that being said, it's early in high school. Your GPA is going to change a heck of a lot by the time we get to those end of junior year GPAs that are used for college admission. We talk about college admission. I'm going to be quoting weighted GPAs. The weighted GPA is on the high school transcript. It is calculated at the end of each year. It does update, I believe, as well in the middle of the year as well, but end of the year is really the part that you're most concerned about. The GPAs typically by the end of junior year, the top GPA is usually in the 108 range. As you look at that class of 2021 admits, you will see those final GPAs. What I'm going to tell you, though, is that the GPAs between the end of junior year and end of senior year do not move a whole lot. Where they really start to move and shift and spread apart is at the end of the sophomore year and at the end of the junior year as well, because that is when students start to take an increasing number of accelerated courses. So that's when we see those GPAs really start bumping up quite a bit at that point. So here are some other resources for you. And I did promise that I was going to show you some HHS stats for popular schools. So this was harder to put together than it has been in the past because of the whole SAT thing. And all
All right, it looks like we lost Miss Thompson. We can see if she's going to log back on. I've lost the ability to use her presentation. So at this point, going to log out and back in to see if that fixes the audio. Okay. Right. That's so we'll just have to see if she can log back in. I've lost the ability to use her presentation. So we'll just see if she can log back on and join us. In the meantime, if you have other questions or concerns, feel free to type them and I'll see what I can do as far as answering them with respect to colleges, the SATs. I know we have one question I was going to ask Ms. Thompson to answer. It's regarding resources for, I believe it was the SAT. And that was, I believe she was referring to things like Khan Academy, test preparation programs. There's one in town that is run by a woman who is local. I believe it is called Study Smart. If you just go to studysmart.com, that will get you to a website where there's test preparation. There is also Princeton Review, Kaplan Review. Just be careful with those, though. They tend to be a little expensive, but nonetheless, those are just some. Khan Academy, by the way, is a program that if you take the PSAT, you will automatically be given an account with Khan Academy, and you'll be able to access resources that Khan Academy has for PSAT and SAT testing. It also offers not tutoring, but it offers resources for students to use based on their test results. So if you take the PSAT, your test results are actually shared with Khan Academy. Khan Academy can then give you very direct tutoring and is going to offer those resources based on your results. Okay. There's a question here about ROTC, which is a great question. So any kind of extracurricular programs, it's best to look on websites, the college websites. I'm sure Miss Thompson, as good as she is, can easily just whip out a bunch of schools that have ROTC programs because that's how good she is. But I think one of the best things to do is also look on the websites. That's also a question that you can ask as you are visiting different colleges or as you're researching them. You can certainly go ahead and look at their websites to see if they have an ROTC program. Welcome back, Ms. Thompson. Okay, you're on mute.
Well, so that was a great time. Hopefully nobody saw me freaking out and yelling at my husband. So basically it's just like your house. And I was the only one that lost internet. And so here we are, we're back. Give me a second.
That's
and
okay.
I will get us back together.
Take your time. I was just trying to answer some questions.
Were you doing a little song and dance?
A little bit, yeah. I took out my top hat and my cane. I've had to do it in the past, so we're good.
Okay, well, I was actually most concerned that I thought that all 200 of you got dumped off.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out also. I was wondering if it was me. I was wondering if it was you. I was wondering if everybody got dumped until I finally realized that we were all still here waiting for the reappearance of Miss Thompson.
So I actually think that I probably jinxed us because I said to Miss Smedley this afternoon, you know, what happens if you get kicked off? Does everybody lose their connection?
Okay.
And so, yeah, pretty much jinxed us. All right, so give me just a second and I will get us back up and going. Give me 2 seconds. And that teaches me too, because I tried to not use my Wi-Fi and use a wired connection to be sure that I had stable internet.
To be sure you wouldn't get disconnected.
To be sure I had very stable internet, which was obviously less stable with a wire.
Right. While we're waiting for this to reload really quick, the question about the presentation deck, it's going to be available on our website, correct?
Yeah, it's actually already available. I wish I could figure out how to type that to you. So if you go, here, I'll show you real quick. So if you go on the Hillsborough High School website and I'm going to teach you how to get to my website. And you go to, there we go, share. All right. If you're on the Hillsborough High School website and you go to school counseling, you will see a link for college and career counseling. Welcome to the college and career counseling website. All these resources are here and available for you. If you scroll on down here, you'll see a link for presentations and early college planning night. And so in here, there is the slide deck. There's also some of the links. Once the YouTube is up and running, I always throw that in here as well. And there are tons of other resources in here that you can utilize at any time, including that enrichment and summer opportunities information that I was talking about a little bit before. That's in here. Lots of other stuff as well that'll help students. All right, so let me pop back over, go back to my little slideshow, and we'll start from there. So we should be seeing the HHS stats for popular schools. I was talking about Rutgers. When we see a range of SAT scores here, we are talking about what schools will call the mid 50%, which means the 25th and 75th percentile of students that were admitted. Couple things about that. This is the SATs that I've quoted are from the universities as a whole. I will tell you that those numbers at schools last year shifted in an upwards direction from where they were pre-COVID. Because if a student is not submitting their scores, they are more than likely lower, which basically starts driving up the SAT scores into a higher range. And so you're going to see some kind of these scores here are much higher than they were previously. And because students who were submitting scores were submitting high ones, basically. When we talk about Rutgers, it's important to know that the different schools within the university have different admission criteria, and students applying to Rutgers can apply to many schools. So you'll see a high accept rate. However, that does not mean that they were accepted necessarily into their school of choice. So they may have applied to business and arts and sciences and School of Environmental and Biological. They really want business. They may not have gotten into business. They may have gotten into environmental and biological, which has the kind of the lowest averages compared to the other programs that are in New Brunswick. Still not particularly low, but the lowest. So that still counts as an accept. The different colleges within New Brunswick have different SAT ranges. The highest ones I would say are pharmacy and engineering, probably followed by business and nursing. So the specialty schools tend to be a little bit higher. You can get an idea about what the rest of the options are here. These are, just some of them. Tried to give you a sampling of some of our most popular schools. Obviously, there's a ton more, but this kind of gives you an idea about where students are. The students who are getting into, these schools in this range are, probably have some number of honors and AP courses, or in some cases, all honors and AP courses in all 4 years. They're kind of in this range here. Students who are looking at some of these schools here tend to have a mix of CP honors and AP courses, or perhaps all. It really depends upon upon the student, but certainly some of these students here getting into these schools are just strong, solid college prep across the board kids. When we talk about these schools, same kind of thing. I tend to see a lot of our students do dabble a little bit in like an honors course here in a subject that they like. But certainly not all honors, all AP. Again, some are just straight up CP kids who are good students. That's this range. When we talk about Hillsborough students, I think I mentioned before that typically by the end of high school, or by the time we get to end of junior year, the highest GPA is typically in that 107, 108 range. It's the weighted GPA. I would say the middle of the class by that point tends to run something like a 94-ish, is kind of the middle of the class, if it helps the students to kind of gauge where they are. Someone did ask about weighted GPA. I'm going to hold that question and answer it in the Q&A at the end because it's a little bit involved. This gives you an idea about what our schools look like. Let's talk about visiting. So visiting looks different than it did pre-COVID. Before COVID, there was no like virtual visit wasn't really like a thing. Schools were doing zero in the virtual space. One of the things I actually think has really come out of this is that schools have developed robust virtual programs, and that can really, I really encourage students to kind of start there because you can attend some of the virtual programs, learn more about the school, determine, do you want to make the effort to go and visit this campus? Because going and visiting a campus in a lot of cases is not honestly as easy as it used to be. You used to be like in October, you used to be able to like turn around and throw a rock and hit 5 campuses having an open house on October 19th. It's not like that anymore. At this point, a lot of schools are still not having large scale open houses. Schools have opened up though, and they are doing campus tours, but now they require reservations. They're much more size limited in terms of how many families can go on a tour at a time. Those tours may only take you through outdoor spaces. So attending virtual visits might be your only opportunity at this point to be taking a look at the inside of dorm rooms. And we don't know, when that's going to change. We've continued to see a lot more open up. What will things look like by the spring of this year? I don't really know. What are things going to look like by next fall? Again, kind of anybody's guess. But students can use different types of programming to get a look at different parts of the university. Where campus tours and open houses are different is a campus tour tends to be a student-led tour with a relatively smallish group of people. It depends upon the school and the state that it's in, honestly, right now, in terms of how big that group's going to be. Open house is a larger scale event, typically includes an opportunity to learn a lot more about academics, perhaps presentations from different academic units within the university, maybe clubs and universities are there, but there's just kind of a lot more going on. So I feel like that's almost like going on a Sunday to a car dealership where you can go and you can look at all the things and nobody needs to know who you are and you don't feel like you're put on the spot. Whereas the smaller campus tour, like people notice you, there's 20 of you, you can't really hide. So for students who are really kind of shy, they also tend to prefer that open house as a way to start the process. When is the time to start? Virtual visits, you get on there at any time. Start doing that stuff. And in terms of in-person visits, look towards the spring of this year and through next year. Those are not things that you want to entirely hold off on until senior year. What's the point? Honestly, determining fit is really huge. I can't tell you how many times a student has thought like, oh, I'll be all fine. I don't need to visit my schools. I'll be all fine. And then they get on campus in the spring of their senior year and that place that they thought they were so excited to attend, like doesn't look at all what they thought it was going to look like. And they really don't feel so comfortable there. So it's a great time for students to knock that kind of stuff out early. Also, many colleges, but not all, track college visits, and some consider demonstrated interest in the college admission process. There are lots of ways demonstrated interest is considered, but visiting a campus, attending online programs, and engaging are some of them. I just posted something on my HHS College and Career Counseling Facebook yesterday, a whole article about demonstrated interest if you want to learn more about it. Moving on to majors and careers. As I mentioned earlier, we will be doing a youth science session with students in their sophomore year, but there are lots of other ways here for students to do some career exploration, different kinds of surveys, different kinds of quizzes. I just did that Me3 one today. It's pretty easy. It was kind of based off of pictures and it gave me a couple of different ideas of careers. The youth science one is in depth. It gives great information back. We did that one for the first time last year. But there's lots of other ways for students to learn. I encourage them to also try working backwards. Look at people who have jobs that you think are really, really awesome, like use things like LinkedIn and work backwards. How did they get there? And take a look at things that way. Also, high school is a great time to start doing that shadowing, volunteering, interning, starting to take a look at what people are doing so that you can figure out if that's something that you want to do when you grow up. Is it something that you're interested in enough in to pursue when you get to college? What about major exploration? There's a whole bunch of different things right here, a bunch of good resources for students to use to explore majors. I think one of the things that's really hard for students to figure out is like, if I major in psychology, what can I do with it? So there's a what can I do with this major list. And so I find that's really helpful because there's not necessarily that one-to-one relationship between major and career. So it's important for students to understand the many different ways they can go from a single major. Along those lines, there's also not a one-to-one correlation between undergrad and grad study. So what a student does as an undergrad is not necessarily what they're going to go on to do in grad school. So for students who are thinking, you know what, I want to be a lawyer, you're not looking for an undergrad major in law. You're looking for an undergrad major in something, for most students, that's going to give you a lot of reading and writing experience. That's going to prepare you for applications for law school. If you're looking to do a law specialty, you might be looking to pick up a more specialized undergraduate major, perhaps business if you want to go into corporate law, environmental science, or environmental studies if you're hoping to go into environmental law. There's lots of different ways to get there. Pre-law, not a major. Pre-med, not a major. So there's a concentration. Students are going to need to find an actual major that they're interested in. A lot of our students are interested in pre-med. I encourage them to look far and wide beyond the field of biology. Some of the acceptance rates to med school are actually much better for students who are not doing things like biology. Some med schools hold spots for students looking from different majors. Did you know that Johns Hopkins Med holds 2 spots every year for students who are art majors, like art, visual art? Wouldn't think so, but there it is. So I want students to keep an open mind about what they are looking to major in. Remember that high school doesn't expose them to all of the possible things that are out there. We don't have courses in data science. We don't have courses in anthropology, and neither does anybody else. So they are going to encounter those things for the first time when they get to college. Some of the things that are hardest to declare later: nursing, engineering, and architecture. So it is very helpful if students are more firm on those fields before they get in. At some schools, it's not possible to change into those programs. So I generally encourage students who think they have an interest in those areas that it is typically best for students to start in those programs and come out if they decide that that's not the path they want to pursue, rather than to hope to change into those majors after the first semester or year, because they may find that either they can't change at their current institution into those majors, or that they're now perhaps a whole year behind in study because of the way those courses are sequenced. I do have some resources for you about some of the highest projected growth rate jobs that are out there that you can certainly take a look at. Because of my little snafu on internet, I know I'm running a little bit later than I planned, so I'm going to skip right here to the financial aid part. So how much is this all going to set us back? There's a view of what the possible price ranges can be. So these are the different things that make up cost of attendance. We've got tuition and fees. So these are the price ranges, and you're going to see big price ranges, even in a single category. So within out-of-state publics, tuition from $20,000 all the way up to $45,000, room and board, 11 to 20, cost of attendance, all of these things together. So when we talk about total cost of an institution, here are some sticker prices. These are not cost of attendance. You'll note that I say to expect to add another $5,000 to $7,000 on for each school for total cost of attendance. Different schools use different calculations, so I stripped all those out to try to get us down so that, like, comparing apples to apples here. You'll see RVCC. For RVCC, you're talking about $7,000 a year. That's assuming the kid's living home. That's not talking about the gas expenses. That's also assuming they're not paying any rent. If they are, that's going to add up. That's going to cost them more above into their expenses. Rutgers, New Brunswick, it's about $16,000 if you're going to live at home. If you're going to live on campus, it's about $30,000. The cost of attendance for Rutgers is just over $36,000 if you are looking to live on campus. So that's all these other expenses added in. You see TCNJ and Rowan. So the most expensive of the New Jersey publics is Rutgers, New Brunswick, followed by TCNJ. I feel like Rowan, Montclair kind of come in just below that, and JIT's in that range as well. Then we move up the ladder to the next expensive option. You see I'm moving from community college to in-state public. Now I'm going to move to out-of-state public, only that's a really big window. Schools like West Virginia University, some of the Pennsylvania publics that are not named Penn State or Pitt, so East Stroudsburg, Westchester, some of our other friends there. You'll see some of those numbers, some of the State University of New York, some of the SUNY schools that come in the upper 30s or right around 40. So a school like Binghamton is not a heck of a lot different than the cost of Rutgers for many families, especially if the student might qualify for a little bit of merit scholarship at some of the out-of-state schools. But however, you will see there is a big wide range of how much those out-of-state publics cost. So we've got kind of like the WVU, Alabama, out-of-state publics, out-of-state Pennsylvania schools not named Penn State. And then as we get into the $50,000 to $55,000 range, that's where you'll find UDEL, Maryland, University of Vermont, Penn State, VTech, and some of the others. I will tell you some of the southern public universities are more economical. So that is a place that I have recommended students to take a look if they are, looking to go outside of our region. The northern ones, the California ones, like UC Berkeley, they're very expensive. You're definitely starting to get into the range of a private university once you get into some of those schools. So along the range of the privates, we see some range here. We've got Rider, they just recentered their tuition, and so they're going down to $52,000 for this year. Quinnipiac is significantly more expensive at $67,000. Lehigh moving up the chain, NYU, UPenn topping at around $80,000 at this point. So remember when I talked about value before? This is where we start making value judgments as to what is worth it for our family, given our family situation, and also given our my child's long range plans. Are they hoping to go to graduate school? Because if they are, and if we're talking about, if we don't have this money in a bank, are we taking a whole bunch of loans for undergrad and then they're going to go to grad school when they could have just gone to a cheaper university? There's lots of conversations to be had there. And we encourage families to start those conversations early in high school. When we talk about different types of aid, we've got merit-based aid that is based on what your kid has done, what they have achieved during high school. So that could be based upon, that's almost always based significantly upon their grades, which also takes into account things like course rigor, the difficulty of the courses they're taking, their GPA, how they look like academically, perhaps test scores, depends if they're submitted or not. Could be leadership, could be community service, special talents. In general, students can expect to receive merit scholarships at schools where they are at or above the average criteria for the school. The further above they are, the more likely they are to receive merit scholarship. Merit scholarships are most generous and also most attainable at private universities. So at a lot of private schools, you'll find that those middle of the road kids are getting some amount of merit scholarship. It's not necessarily a ton of money, but it's kind of like a feel-good amount of money, I guess. But it might be enough to bring it closer to within the range of kind of a New Jersey public university. If they are at a private university and they're at the top of the range, they might see a very generous merit scholarship. We have a lot of students who will pick Northeastern, which is pricey on paper. But for students who are strong students, I find that their total package may come down to make the cost of Northeastern be about between $35,000 and $40,000. And for those families, they feel like that's a realistic number for them at the end of the day. Now, who are the least generous? Out-of-state publics. Out-of-state publics, a public university's job is to serve the residents within their state and to try to make education attainable for the residents of that state. So Penn State is not giving anybody a boatload of money if they are from New Jersey. They typically give little to no merit scholarship money, maybe up to $5,000 if you go to Altoona instead of University Park. University of Maryland, also not historical. They have some scholarships, but they're more difficult to obtain. There are some out-of-state schools where they are easier to attain. I have students who get some nice scholarships, some strong students who apply by the right deadlines that get good scholarships at Ohio State, at Purdue, at University of Alabama has a fantastic scholarship program. I've seen great scholarships coming out of Pitt to bring that to a nice, reasonable cost that looks like ours. So it varies somewhat. Know that you typically need to be amongst the best applicants. Some of those schools do have very clear criteria that are publicly available. So that's part of the college search process too, is making sure that we're a match, also financially, and perhaps for merit scholarships at schools. Need-based aid. Need-based aid is based on what you have or don't have, both in turn and what you make. So that is based on information from financial aid applications like the FAFSA, the CSS profile, and school-specific applications. I will tell you, we have an excellent financial aid presentation available on our website. We have a great presenter who helps us out every year. She's terrific. You can certainly look at those resources. Know that there are some fairly significant changes that will impact the sophomore class and the freshman class. And there's still some kind of flux as to when those things are going to take go into practice at this point, and how schools are going to handle them. But there are some changes that are going to be taking place in the next couple of years about what's considered as part of an aid package and who's a parent, and for divorced parents, whose info goes on the FAFSA. There's some changes there. Need-based aid includes loans, grants, and work study. Then when we talk about need-based aid, you've got federal aid. That's money from the federal government. I will tell you that if you would consider yourself middle of the road, Hillsborough or above, you are likely to qualify only for loans from the federal government. The max for freshman year is $5,500, and that is generally what all of our students get. Most of our families do not qualify for state aid, though some do, most don't. So that tends to be for more lower income families in New Jersey. So where do most of our students get money from? They come from institutional aid, so money from the colleges themselves. And that's why I'm talking about really focusing in on that merit aid. Some schools offer their own need-based aid. Know that need-based is defined differently by different schools. Princeton says that anybody making up to $200,000 has financial need, and they give you need-based aid. Rutgers would laugh at you, with a family income of $200,000 saying that there's need, because Rutgers will say you do not have need at that number. So it varies. And then we've got outside aid. So that's aid that you find on your own in terms of outside scholarships. When should students start looking at those? I will tell you that the vast majority of scholarships that you see anytime prior to senior year are primarily contest-based or lottery-style scholarships. So sometimes they're essay scholarships. I do push them out when I feel like there's something other than just data mining. I try not to push out the ones that I think are really just kind of like mining for your data and your kids' data, but things that are, a little bit more purposeful in their application. Those are the ones that I send out. As we move into senior year, there are more extensive options in terms of outside scholarships for students to apply to. It is important. I really encourage students, though, to first really concentrate on working with the schools that they're picking and having a good list, because the majority of the money is likely to come from the schools themselves. Very few students get very large outside merit scholarships. Now, that being said, if you just showed up at my bedroom door over here with $1,000 and asked me if I wanted it, would I send you away and say it's not enough? No, I'd say thank you very much, and I'd be super glad that I wrote that scholarship essay. So it is worth a student's time. However, they do need to kind of prioritize how they spend that time in their senior year. And then there's private loans as well. So early in the high school years, talk about what's financially realistic. You can do the College Board's EFC calculator, which determines what the federal government thinks that your family can pay every year for education, or the federal student aid estimator as well. There's something called net price calculators that every college is required to have on their website that allows you to get and put in some basic information about your family and your financial aid situation, and it lets you know about how much you would be paying if you were looking at that year of schooling there. So I encourage families, over time, not necessarily right now, but to look at in-state publics, out-of-state publics, private. Start to look at what those net prices look like for your family for different schools, and make sure that you're planning. Everybody's kind of on the same page ahead of time about what you're looking for in terms of financial aid and where that fits in terms of the process. So we're going to start doing some live Q&As now. You do see a link on my screen. I'm going to leave it up for a little bit. I have a survey. Hopefully you don't all ding me for my lack of internet there for a minute, but I would very much appreciate if you took some time to look at the survey. This is the first time we've done it post-COVID, also the first time we've done it online. So I'm definitely interested in feedback. That being said, Mr. Y and I are going to move ahead and start asking questions. Y, do you want to talk about weighted GPA? You want me to
Sure, I can. Without trying to go all the way back to my math days of being a math teacher, the weighted GPA is basically, it uses 3 different weighted factors when we are calculating a GPA. So I think I had typed in one of the other responses. For a CP course, the weighted factor is a 1.05. For an honors course, it's 1.1, and for an AP course, it's 1.15. So what happens when we calculate the GPA is we take the final grade, we multiply it by its weighting factor, and then we multiply it by the number of credits that the course is worth, or that the student earns. So just one quick example, if you get a 100 in a CP course, that would adjust the grade because of the weighting to a 105. To get that same 105 in an honors level course, you'd have to get like a 95.5. And to get that same 105 in an AP course, you'd have to get like a 91 or a 92. So the weighting boosts the grades a little bit. Obviously, if you have a lot of AP courses, it's going to boost your GPA quite a bit. And then if you have a lot of AP science courses that are worth 6 and 7 credits, that's gonna affect your GPA a little bit as well. So I hope that helps as far as understanding the GPA.
And along the lines, kind of the importance of the GPA, I would definitely say it's there. It is definitely not the be all end all of college admissions, because it really, when you look at schools, you'll find that it does not come down to just the GPA. The GPA can give me a predictor of whether or not a student is realistically likely in the range for admission, but the analysis of whether a student's going to be admitted or not comes much more down to the actual composition of the transcript. So the individual courses that the student has selected, perhaps how those are related to the major, the intended major, what courses a student has taken advantage of within what Hillsborough has to offer. Have they maximized the curriculum or the number of years of curriculum? Have they maximized the rigor if that's appropriate for that student? What have they kind of taken advantage of? If they're looking at athletic training, have they taken things like anatomy and physiology? We offer that for, at the CP level. So there's lots of options there. And then also the individual grades in those courses. So yeah, those AP, that 0.15 extra weighting does a lot for the GPA, but if an 81 on the transcript is still an 81 on the transcript. And so this, the school is going to see that individual course grade. And ultimately, good news, folks, they only see the final course grades for each individual course. That is what is on the transcript. So they do not see individual marking period grades. I think a lot of students did have a not so great start to this year. So my offering to them is, remember that a final grade takes all of the marking periods and also your final. So we are only 20% or whatever we are of the way there to your final grades for this year. So you have lots of time to still impact that for the remainder of this year and the grades that are going to go into your GPA.
Ms. Thompson, it's also probably, I don't want to expand too much on this, but it's probably important to also tell parents that, our GPA is just that. It's our GPA, and it's the way we calculate it. When a transcript is submitted for college applications, sometimes these colleges are recalculating a GPA to put all the candidates on the same GPA scale. Because while we use a 100-point scale, Bridgewater might be using a 4.0 scale, or they might be using a different scale at Montgomery or something like that. So when a college gets a transcript, they do their own recalculation of a GPA, and that's what they will use more often than just seeing what's on our transcripts when we send them out.
Okay. Someone did ask about, could we post the weighted GPA calculation information on our website? I actually believe that information is accessible in the student parent handbook.
Yeah, it's in the handbook.
So if you go to school info on the website, you'll see the HHS student parent handbook. And there is information here. This year's is here, and you can go through and you'll find the information about how GPA is calculated. The other thing that may be of interest to families is, if you go under school info and you go to school profile, this information is submitted to every college that a student applies to. It's how schools, universities can get an idea about what was available to our students. And in here, you'll see information about the weighted GPA, also an idea of the weighted GPA distribution for students. And this is as of the end of their junior year for the current class and other information about our school and what is available. So students might be interested in that. Will there be finals this year? Yes, to the best of our knowledge, there will be. For colleges that are test optional, are they heavily reliant on the GPA? What I would say is to remember that, you know, when schools are looking at something they call holistic admissions, which is, you know, we're looking at the big picture, right? When we talk about the academic side of that, we've got the transcripts and all of the other things that are a part of that transcript, course rigor, individual grades and GPA, course selection. And then, you know, for others, we've got that, we might have AP testing if the school considers that and if a student has any. And then we've got SATs and ACTs. So what I would say is that if we remove that SAT and ACT bit, that the shifting of that weight has to happen somewhere else. It's kind of like taking the leg off of a table. You got to like shift the balance, you know, to make everything balance with one less leg. So yes, you know, the more of the emphasis on the academics is going to, you know, shift to really the transcript and all of the things that are academic about that transcript. What else we got here? Someone asked about recommendation letters. So one of the things that some or many schools use in the application process is letters of recommendation. One typically is almost always required to come from the student school counselor. So every one of our students has an assigned school counselor that will work with them throughout their 4 years here. That is the person that writes their letter of recommendation. Beyond that, students will be looking to ask two and generally no more than two academic teachers to write letters of recommendation. In general times, which was, you know, pre-COVID, schools really do want to see those letters where possible to come from junior year teachers, teachers who have the most current knowledge of the student at the time that they are applying. There was some shifting from that, you know, during COVID, but for our students for you all who are freshmen and sophomores, I'd really be concentrating on those letters to be coming from ideally junior year teachers. You might wind up coming back to a sophomore year teacher if someone you have again as a senior, perhaps someone that you are also involved with in an outside club or recommendation. So maybe you have Mr. Fenster for US 1 honors, you won't have next year, but you're also in debate club. Like, he'd still be a good letter writer for you because he has other knowledge of you that would get added to letter of recommendation. So what can freshmen and sophomores really be doing? Honestly, concentrate on like practicing building relationships with adults. Students really struggled with that last year virtually. And I think that a lot of us kind of like forgot how to do that in person. So I'd encourage them to really practice doing that this year so that, you know, you have people to pick from when it comes time for a letter of recommendation time. And, you know what it feels like to get to know someone and allow them to get to know you as a student so they can convey that type of information in the process. I'm done there. Why? I see that you marked up. You're answering some outside questions.
I'm trying to answer any kind of the academic stuff rather than the college stuff. And okay. There's this one question about the Johns Hopkins CTY program, and the simple answer to that is yes. There are certain classes that can be taken outside of Hillsborough High School, either online or through programs like Johns Hopkins. But it has to be approved by the school through what's called an option 2 application. So before you go and pay for it, before you go take this course, talk to your school counselor, and you're going to have to fill out that option 2 form and have the course approved. What you need to know about courses taken outside of Hillsborough High School is they do not get put into the GPA calculation. They can be used to progress into the next level if it's approved, but they are not given any kind of consideration for the GPA when it's outside of Hillsborough High School.
All right, and you can find the option 2 information on our website. We'll update it again as we get closer to next year. For students who want to take summer courses next year for option 2, that deadline is typically in June kind of time frame. Sports sports information good enough to have on applications, or do you need to be great in it? Can sports be optional? There are no required anything in terms of extracurricular participation. Some students never participate in any kind of sport, and that is absolutely fine. They get into the schools of their choice. They might be real active in debate and Model UN, and perhaps some other activities. They might have a job. That's great. Sports is not a must-have. Does the student have to be great for it to make a difference? No. What schools are looking at to figure out what you're passionate about, what you do. I would encourage students who are athletes to also look at other involvement outside of athletics, in addition, in areas that are doable for them. And, schools understand that students who participate in sports and other heavy time commitment activities, i.e. marching band, theater, things like that, robotics might be more limited in their other activities. The selective schools, what happens with athletes and sports? Your mileage may vary. It really does depend upon the division of the sport. It depends on the specific university. When students are can realistically play in college, I do ask them to still be really cognizant of the school itself being a good fit for them, because most of them are not going to wind up being professional athletes. They also don't know if they're going to get injured in their first year, if their coach is going to change, and all of a sudden that athletic team is not going to be there for them anymore. So it's great if they've got a place they're real happy with to begin with. And then, I want them to, kind of look far and wide, and also when they can, absolutely use that athletic recruitment as a tool to help them maybe kind of level up to a school that they may not have gotten into without sports. Is sports an automatic admit? No, definitely not. Might an athlete get into a school that they would not get into if they were not an athlete? Yes. That may happen. It depends upon the school, and how low that goes varies. I've had students who are recruited to Ivy League schools to play there, who have had to take additional AP courses online to be more competitive, to get that admission process. It really does vary. Along the lines of Ivy League, what kind of GPA is required for Ivy League colleges? Generally, I see students who are admitted to our Ivy League schools typically have GPAs, very rarely, I would say, have GPAs below 100, unless they were perhaps a recruited athlete. Students who do not have some other type of very special hook, national, international award, very special, unique talent, something, kind of the academic admit types, typically are in the 102 plus range. That being said, we have students with 108s that are denied admission to Ivy League. So there is certainly no guarantee there. Typically, the top 10% of our class this year is probably, the top 15 is like 101. I think the top 10% is like right around a 102 or a 102 and a half this year. And that's about 60 kids above that range. So keep in mind, there's a lot of kids up there in terms of, the very academic students. Due enrollment, you want to get that?
Yeah, I started to type my answer and I started getting wordy, so I figured it would just be easier to answer it live. Dual enrollment is basically the concurrent enrollment that I talked about during the academic portion. So dual enrollment is you take a class in high school, but you are actually receiving credits in high school or four-year high school, as well as for the college. So that would be similar to our concurrent enrollment classes.
All right. I think that is all the questions we currently have. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Someone doesn't, and I'll continue to answer questions as they come in, but I'm going to kind of like wrap us here and say that anybody that wants to go have a lovely evening and go have your dessert and have a great night. Thanks so much for joining us. I will be posting the YouTube link, and I'll also email that out in a couple of days once we get everything all ready. And so I'll just keep answering questions, but for those who are leaving, have a great night. How are we getting numbers such as 108? So basically, it comes down to a student with a very high GPA, like 108. That is a kid that has maximized the academic courses that they can take at Hillsborough. They have taken a very high number of academic courses, a very low number of unweighted courses. They've taken a lot of honors and AP courses, typically a lot of science courses, and they've gotten grades that are all in the 95 to 100 type range in all of their courses over all of the years here. That's really how you get your GPA into that very, very high range. When we talk about that, that is a cumulative GPA based on all of their grades for, at this point in the year for our seniors, all the way through the end of their junior year. So that's a final grade times the course weighting times the number of credits for that course. We add those up, we divide by the total number of credits, and that's how we arrive at a weighted GPA. And I'm going to keep scrolling through and see what else I'm missing. When do students apply for colleges? Students can begin submitting their applications in the beginning of their senior year. The first deadline is October 15th. When we get there, we encourage students to not send out any applications over the summer. Lots of changes happen to their schedules, and it is best for them to hold off and wait till later. So we have passed our most busy time of our senior year. At this point, we've sent out about 3,000 applications at this point of the senior year. So we're past the midpoint. Things have shifted up from the older days, and it's definitely an earlier applying group for the most part. Senior year is also when you complete applications for financial aid. Do we have letter grades? Yes and no. Yes, in that grade ranges represent a letter grade. No, in that you will never see a letter grade on a transcript or report card.
Right. I just hit send as you started that one. Anything on a report card or a transcript is going to be numeric on a scale of 0 to 100.
All right. If a student's in marching band and they love it, can they manage the school academic load throughout the high school years? Yes, absolutely. If they are committed to staying in marching band for 4 years, can they take advanced courses? Can they take full course loads academically? Yes, absolutely. They need to be committed to time management for sure, especially as that can take a lot of time. Many of the students who are in marching band and choir may choose to take some of those option 2 courses to take things outside of school. There are a couple of popular courses that students might take to meet the career requirement to kind of knock that out. They might take financial literacy outside of school unless they're planning on taking AP Macro or microeconomics. So that's the way to knock 2 other courses kind of out of their school schedule that allows them to stay in more bands, more choirs, things like that throughout school. And I think, is there a list of colleges that give credit for athletes? I'm not quite sure what you mean there. So all schools would consider, athletes as a part of the admission process. I'm not quite sure what you mean there. So it might be a good question to follow up with the school counselor about. All right, and I think we're kind of to the end. So thank you so much, folks. Have a fantastic evening. And if you have follow-up questions, your school counselor is a great place to start with those.
I can quickly answer that option 2 courses question. As Ms. Thompson said, financial literacy is extremely popular, especially with our kids who want to do band for 4 years or they want to do the choir for 4 years. And then from there, it's mostly electives. That's probably the best. We have to be careful with math courses. They are not often approved, especially if it's Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or Geometry. History might get approved depending on the online course or the summer school that you attend. They might approve that. But really, it's financial lit and it is elective courses. Those are the ones that are most easily approved. And the kids don't have to do anything other than just take the course. If it's academic courses, the kids are going to have to take our HHS exam before we advance them to the next course. And they're going to have to score a certain grade on that exam before we advance them. So really electives and financial lit are your best option 2 courses.
And definitely the most popular. So that's most of what I see when I see school transcripts.